Andrew parked at the mall and looked out the window. It was an early August evening. The day was already tending to sunset, but it gets dark late in summer. The cool, fresh twilight is still far away. Andrew had a difficult day at work, summarizing the results for the month, developing a new project, but the man even liked this multitasking. Firstly, it is interesting to solve constantly emerging issues. It looks like an exciting game. Secondly, at the end of the month, there will be a good increase to the already high salary. And thirdly, work issues distract from sad thoughts, do not allow you to plunge into the past. Fatigue, workload, that's the salvation from heavy feelings. Andrew was in no hurry to get out of the car. It's nice and cool in the cabin, but it's hot outside. There has been an abnormal heat wave for several weeks now. People are looking forward to autumn to breathe freely. Andrew looked out the window again. Two people came into his field of vision, a middle-aged man and a thin teenage boy. He's tall, a little angular. He was walking and talking animatedly with his father about something, gesticulating active light gait, tanned long arms, legs, feet, fashionable sneakers. When Andrew saw boys like that, he always thought that he could have had exactly the same son now. He would have turned 14 this summer. Perhaps the son would be interested in programming or sports, football, or maybe he would have loved to draw. But what's the point of thinking about it if this boy wasn't even born? Or maybe it wasn't a boy at all, but a girl. But some sixth sense told Andrew that many years ago he had lost his son, and through his own fault. To think otherwise is just to try to justify yourself and deceive yourself. How many times over the years has Andrew regretted his behavior? But time cannot be turned back. He could only suffer from guilt, yearn for the future that had happened, miss Victoria, and try in vain to look for her features in others, to search and of course not to find. Andrew was different then, young, selfish somewhere, even windy. Before meeting Victoria, he did not want to remember himself at all, the old one. I felt ashamed. How could he behave like that? Andrew realized that thoughts and memories were taking hold of him again. This happened sometimes. Some situations from the past, voices, images, all this still did not let him go, and the man assumed that he would not well, he deserved that kind of life. Andrew was born and grew up in a well-off family for his city. His father is a successful businessman. His mother is the chief accountant of a large factory. A big, beautiful house, expensive toys, fashionable clothes travel. Andrew knew no refusal in anything. In addition to his parents, he was actively pampered by his grandparents on both sides. The boy realized early on that there was a kind of competition between them. Who does his grandson love more? And the cunning boy began to use this. He played on the feelings of elderly relatives, manipulated them, and achieved everything he wanted. Andrew studied at a prestigious gymnasium. He always had a lot of friends there, boys and girls. They formed a strong and very cheerful company. All these were children from wealthy families, so teenagers did not deny themselves anything. Cafes, attractions, entertainment centers. Later, expensive clubs, hangouts in bars. Andrew's life was fun and carefree. He entered the local university, did not want to go to the capital, as his father did not persuade him. There's a completely different level, different perspectives. The parent inspired the overgrown offspring, but this very offspring understood perfectly well that he would not have the freedom there that he had here. He would have to study there, poring over textbooks, otherwise he would not get a diploma. And here he's already got it all figured out. On a tip from older friends, he knew who and how much to pay before the session, so as not to waste his youth on lectures and seminars, and the boy was not going to deviate from his plans. As always, everything turned out exactly as he wanted it to. Andrew became a student at the economics department of a local university, and a golden era of life began for him. The guy moved out from his parents. My grandmother and grandfather, on my father's side, gave my only grandson an apartment in the city center in honor of graduation, and my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side, in an effort to keep up with relatives, presented him with the keys to an expensive foreign car. Andrew felt happy, omnipotent, independent. There was a bright, happy life ahead, friends, entertainment, beautiful girls. There was simply no room for studying in this busy schedule. Andrew hardly showed up at the university, so he visited before the session to resolve issues with the teachers. It was an ordinary thing. Andrew was now ashamed of his attitude towards girls. Back then, in his student years, the guy probably considered them beautiful things created especially for him and people like him. Andrew did not take into account the feelings of the girls, did not listen to their desires, and chose his companions like a product in a store purely based on external data. In his youth, he liked ladies with model data, necessarily big-mouthed and uninhibited, smile. He just didn't look at the others. The handsome, wealthy guy had no shortage of girlfriends. The girls themselves stuck to him, approached him to get acquainted in a club or cafe, even lay in wait at the door of the university, and attracted attention with some request. Naturally, in this scenario, Andrew felt like a valuable prize. It seemed to him that anything was possible. Sometimes Andrew got bored with easy relationships. He always liked difficult tasks, and he himself paid attention to some girl. He tried to get her. It was a kind of hunter and prey game. Some ladies have been pretending to be inaccessible beauties for a while. The game had begun, and he used all his charm to break the resistance. He loved it, creating something like a beautiful fairy tale. Huge bouquets of roses, cute plush toys, exquisite jewelry, and also bold, reckless acts like a love song with a rock band under the windows of another beauty. Andrew liked to come up with something new, to surprise, to inspire delight and admiration. And now the coldest snow queen is melting in his arms. When the game ended, Andrew's interest quickly waned. Having seemed so mysterious and attractive until recently, the girls suddenly became boring and uninteresting. Andrew pulled away. He became bored. He could not stand the dullness in his everyday. To part with another lady of the heart, I had to be a little sad. It was no longer as exciting and pleasant as the beginning of a relationship. But what can be done? Andrew didn't like women's tears. He was burdened by long conversations and pleas. All this was depressing and made me feel like a bad person. Therefore, Andrew preferred the tactics of accusation. He always found something to blame for a passion that did not want to accept a breakup. Everyone had weaknesses. Yes, maybe it was too cruel. It is possible that the girls had complexes after such attacks by Andrew, maybe even psychological trauma. Well, how else? Otherwise, they just kept up. Different situations have happened in Andrew's life. One of his former lovers, Veronica, distinguished herself especially, and after this story, Andrew became much more careful. Andrew met Veronica at a nightclub. She was a girl of his type. Bright, beautiful, liberated. She was dancing so enthusiastically on the dance floor that it was simply impossible not to notice her. The girl was clearly already a little. Her long hair fluttered beautifully as Veronica turned in the dance. The girl was the center of attention and clearly enjoyed it. Andrew just recently broke up with Aliona. They had been dating for almost 3 months, a record for a young man, and now the guy was in search of new adventures. Of course, he immediately decided that this evening he would leave the club only with her, with a beautiful young woman in a daring miniskirt and high platform sandals. Veronica looked somewhat vulgar. Andrew immediately realized that he would not be bored with this girl. The guy didn't come up to her right away. We need to take a closer look first. He admired Veronica for about an hour before deciding to get closer. The girl came to the club with her friends. They had long since returned to their table, but Veronica still did not leave the dance floor. She enjoyed it all. Mics, the atmosphere of the club, the loud music, her own movements. It was very attractive. Andrew just smiled at her, catching his gaze. She froze for a moment. Her huge blue eyes burned Andrew from head to toe, and then their gazes met again. Andrew admired the girl's face, which immediately attracted his attention. Up close, she turned out to be even more beautiful than seen from afar. Chiseled cheekbones, well-defined lips, huge, simply bottomless eyes. The girl suddenly, without saying a word, came close to Andrew. The guy, as if fascinated, watched her movements and waited for what would happen next. The beauty clearly took the initiative, and it was very interesting and unusual, not according to the script. Veronica stared into Andrew's eyes and kissed him. He, not believing in what was happening, hugged the girl, hugged her to him. She didn't mind. Then they danced together. Andrew realized that he was fascinated by this strange girl. He really liked the twinkle in her eyes, a kind of gleam of light madness. He had never had such friends before. She was very different from the others. Then they did get to know each other and found out each other's names. Oh, I've never met anyone like this before. Andrew admired her. Oh, it's not surprising. There are simply no more people like me, Veronica smiled. Veronica rented a room in the city. Once she came here from the village and even managed to enter a law school, but the girl's soul never really lay down to study. Although she was definitely not deprived of her abilities, she just liked entertainment, socializing, dancing until morning in nightclubs, adventures. All this did not go down well with the role of a diligent student. In her first year, the beautiful Veronica fell in love with a young and charismatic history teacher, so much so that I couldn't even think about anything but his gray eyes. The girl has always been distinguished by her direct character. She's used to taking what she likes. And of course, Veronica did not hide her feelings from this young professor. He could not resist the charms of a young beauty. Everything became known at the dean's office. The professor was forced to resign, but Veronica herself was expelled at the first opportunity. I must say it was not difficult because the girl rarely bothered to attend lectures. In her student life, she was attracted to a completely different. The girl did not want to return to the village. It was boring, and it was stuffy there. From an early age, she dreamed of escaping from this swamp, but it was impossible to stay in the hostel, which was provided only to students after the expulsion. So I had to get a job as a waitress in a bar. I had to take money for food and housing somewhere. They needed beautiful waitresses to lift their spirits. The visitors paid well. There was enough to rent a small apartment and for food, and even inexpensive, but spectacular clothes from local economy class boutique. Veronica was completely satisfied with such a life. The work is not dusty. The atmosphere is pleasant. It was a big bar. Many guests gathered here every evening, and local musicians, mainly rock bands and rock soloists, performed. Veronica liked this music. In general, she felt in her element here. Of course, the guests, the staff, and the musicians paid attention to the young beauty. It was in this bar that the girl met Dmitri, her first true love. He was the lead singer of the band, who enjoyed the greatest success here. In general, they soon began to live together. Dmitri showed Veronica the world. They traveled to many cities in America. Dmitri's band toured the country, giving concerts here and there, hangouts, train stations, bars, and even concert halls. Then, as often happens, Dmitri met another muse. Veronica had been going through a breakup for a long time, but then decided that it was not worth wasting her youth on longing and regret. Moreover, she has a fan again. Veronica consciously decided not to fall in love anymore. Twice it didn't do her any good. Now she just lived, enjoyed companionship, youth, freedom, got nothing but pleasure from life, and did not think about the future. She was a little crazy, and that attracted Andrew a lot to her. He himself lacked her lightness and wildness. Veronica could get behind the wheel after a bottle of champagne and drive past the police at high speed. She fearlessly sat on the roofs of high-rise buildings, hanging down her long legs, easily converged with people. She even committed shoplifting, not out of necessity, but just for the excitement. Yes, there was a lot more. It's impossible to list everything. Andrew has never been bored with her. He didn't know what to expect from the girl in the next moment, and it was dizzying. Veronica wrote poetry and played the guitar masterfully. She also joked wittily and sang beautifully. She always attracted people to her. A man is a holiday next to whom it is never boring, and this amazing girl was head over heels in love with Andrew, despite the fact that she once promised herself never to fall in love again. "You're special," Veronica said, looking at Andrew seriously. "I feel good with you. You understand me? My soul, you are the best." Andrew melted away from these words and really felt unique. It was nice to realize that Veronica, who invariably attracted men's gazes wherever she appeared, was so devoted to him. She had many acquaintances. It seemed that the whole city was her friends, but the girl did not have a close relationship with anyone. Hanging out, going somewhere together is welcome. Only here she poured out her soul to Andrew alone. Veronica did not communicate with her parents anymore because they always wanted to mold her into something else, to remake her, to make her who she really is not. What can I say? The girl sighed sadly. They actually wanted a son. And that's probably why they didn't like everything about me. Veronica didn't laugh like that, too loud and bubbly. didn't talk like that too much and fast. I was friends with the wrong people. I didn't study well enough. I behaved provocatively. In general, the girl was picked on about, and that's why she decided to run away from home as early as possible, go to university, and go to the city. The father chose the specialty for his daughter. He decided that she was obliged to become a lawyer, and she agreed. It was simply impossible to argue with the parent. Well, already in the city, having escaped from the total control of her mother and father, the girl finally decided to become herself, which she never regretted. When they found out that I had dropped out of the university, they wanted to bring me back and raise me. But how did I imagine it? Well, no way. I went against my father's will, and he said that in that case, I was no longer their daughter and I could no longer count on their help. Live as you like. That's what he told me. Well, that's what I needed. So I live as I know, and I don't regret anything. Andrew was amazed listening to Veronica's stories. She was a whole year younger than him. I've already experienced so much in my life. I've seen so much. Time passed, and Veronica, with her endless hangouts, began to tire Andrew. He sometimes wanted to spend an evening at home in front of the TV, but the girl dragged him outside again and again. Sometimes she was drawn to the bar with irresistible force. Then she offered to jump into the river right from the bridge on the city embankment, then just walk around the night city. The adventurism of the girl, so attractive earlier, turned into a significant disadvantage for Andrew. To live without ever knowing what to expect from this abnormal. Once it was exciting and pleasing, now it was annoying. Veronica loved Andrew. The guy felt it, understood it, and assumed, of course, that parting with her would not be, but he couldn't even imagine what followed. Andrew became more and more convinced that it was time to part with her. She had been living in his apartment for almost a year. There were her things everywhere. Andrew hadn't even imagined what her move would look like yet. Is she packing her bags and going nowhere? A difficult moment. He had never invited girls to his house to live together before, and in general, he had not been together with anyone for so long, and he did not know how to get out of the situation. Veronica noticed that something was wrong between them. She asked questions, and Andrew was thoughtfully silent, sometimes sighing sadly, preparing the ground. Let Veronica figure out for herself where everything is going. Maybe you won't have to explain yourself. And yet the explanation took place. It happened on a December evening. Andrew then returned from university tired and angry. A diploma is on his nose, and he got an uncooperative leader. This man flatly refused to take money and demanded serious work on his diploma. Andrew was already physically unable to manage by the right date. And then there was Veronica with her eternal carefree smile on her lips and untimely offers. What are you worried about? Just think, a diploma. She shrugged her elegant shoulders, and people live without a diploma. And then Andrew couldn't stand it. Discontent that had accumulated for several months broke out. He shouted at Veronica, called her selfish and a dummy who lives at the expense of others and does not think about the future. There was so much pain and horror in the girl's eyes as she listened to this. I'm sorry. I'll be the way you want me to be. She said softly when Andrew finished his angry tirade. The guy was taken aback. This girl has been fighting for the right to be herself and behave the way she wants for so long. And then suddenly it happened. Veronica said she was ready to remake herself to please him. But it's too... I'm sorry I yelled at you, Andrew said, pulling himself together. But still, we have to break up. I've been wanting to tell you about this for a long time and didn't dare. Now it somehow turned out. No, the girl exclaimed. There was desperation in her voice. She was clearly not going to accept it. No, Veronica, in a fit of emotion, swept a vase off the table. It hit the tile on the floor and crumbled into thousands of small fragments. Oh, you can't do this. You can't drive me away. Push me away. Marinecker, we are adults. I love you more than anyone in this world. Don't you understand? Andrew looked at Veronica, who was hysterical, and realized more and more clearly that she was really abnormal. It used to seem so attractive and mysterious. Now, it is repulsive, frightening, pathetic, and unpleasant. Go away, Andrew said, walking with his back to the door. He tried to dodge her embrace. Veronica clung to him like a drowning man to a straw. He managed to get her out the door then. Where would she go? Andrew wasn't particularly worried about this. Veronica has a lot of friends in the city, and there are also fans who will gladly take her in. She will not be lost. Andrew packed Veronica's belongings into 2 large bags that evening. Cruel, of course. But he doesn't have to put up with an abnormal woman next to him now if he was once stupid enough to bring her into his house. These things were then taken away by one of Veronica's friends. She contacted Andrew herself. "How is she?" the guy asked, more out of politeness. According to all the rules of social protocol, he simply had to ask this question. "See, she cries all the time. She doesn't want anything," her friend said sadly. Andrew nodded. He hoped that very soon Veronica would be comforted and meet a new love. This has happened many times in her life, a common thing for Veronica. But she was not comforted. Moreover, she began to pursue Andrew with her usual obsession. One day she showed up at his university in an outfit resembling a monk's. A mournful look, a floor-length skirt, beautiful hair, a scarf. "I'm changing for you," she said softly, looking at Andrew. "You see, I'm trying very hard. I'm different now, submissive, obedient. I'll do whatever you tell me to do." It's not just a scarecrow. Furthermore, declarations of love and pleas for forgiveness began to appear on the walls of the entrance where Andrew's apartment was located. Veronica also flooded the guy with emails and paper letters. Some of them were even written in verse. Wherever Andrew went, he came across it, whether it was a shopping mall, a cafe, a bar, just a park. Finally, Veronica pursued him, begged for attention, even threatened him. Andrew didn't know where to go from her. Persuasion did not help. Veronica didn't seem to be listening to him. She continued to bend her line, and it was frightening. One day, she attacked him. Andrew has just defended his diploma. He was returning home after a celebration dedicated to this long-awaited event. It was already very late. There's not a soul on the street. Andrew got out of the taxi, paid the driver, and went to his entrance in a good mood. Veronica flew at him like a fury, dressed all in black and therefore indistinguishable from the background of the morning landscape. "If you don't want to be with me, then no one will get you." And Veronica attacked Andrew. He was surprised and did not even immediately begin to resist. The girl possessed some truly superhuman strength at that moment. Is still a man, which means that in any case, he is more physically powerful. Andrew, of course, managed to push the attacker away from him. Veronica fell on the asphalt, hit her back hard. "What are you doing?" Andrew exclaimed, "BAK. I'm completely out of my mind." "I'm sorry." Big tears were flowing down her cheeks. "I don't know what came over me. I love you. How could I?" Andrew disappeared into the entrance, slamming the door loudly. His heart was restless now. Veronica made a mistake today. This attempt was doomed to failure in advance. What if next time she lunged at him with a knife? Being afraid of a girl is something new. Andrew found himself in an unenviable position. And the very next day, the same Veronica friend who took her things called him, and in a broken voice informed him that Veronica was trying to leave this world. The girl did not succeed. At the last moment, the rope snapped. She was noticed in time. Help arrived very quickly, but now Veronica is in intensive care. Andrew didn't know what to do. He felt guilty about what had happened to this girl. On the other hand, the guy was still afraid of her terrible, unpleasant feelings. Everything ended well for Andrew. Veronica survived, but she was diagnosed with a disease that debuted due to extreme stress. The guy preferred not to think about what exactly was the cause of that stress. Veronica was sent to a closed clinic. Andrew learned from mutual friends that her parents are now visiting her. Apparently, they realized that they really needed their wayward daughter. Friends also sometimes went to Veronica's hospital, but Andrew never met her again. And anyway, he really wanted to forget this whole difficult story, but it didn't work out. That was probably the first time he thought about what was wrong with girls. To him, they are just things, beautiful and valuable, but things. How many women's tears were shed because of him? He never considered the feelings of his girlfriends. They, many of them, loved him so sincerely. Since then, Andrew has become much more careful. Now he listened more attentively to the girls, noticed a lot, tried to be more sensitive and helpful, and he always kept a safe distance. Light, easy novels, pre-agreed conditions, no romance but no surprises. Veronica was enough for him. Andrew graduated from the university. His father got him a good position at a local city-forming enterprise. The salary is more than decent. The career prospects are impressive. Andrew plunged into his work. He was not an important student, but he turned out to be a wonderful employee. The guy delved into all the nuances, engaged in self-education, looked at more experienced colleagues. As for his personal life, Andrew has not yet thought about any serious relationship. They actively tried to introduce him to girls from decent families, but Andrew was like a flip. He didn't want a wedding yet, much less children. It seemed that he hadn't had enough fun yet, and he didn't need any extra problems. The story of Veronica was still fresh in my memory. Superficial relationships in which everyone understood everything from the very beginning. Novels without prospects, arising solely for an easy and pleasant pastime. This was quite acceptable to Andrew. This went on for several years. Andrew took place in the profession. Now he was in good standing with his company. He was respected. The young specialist was promoted up the career ladder. And this was already the result of his merits, and not the result of the efforts of an authoritative father. By the way, the parents were very proud of their son. They didn't even think he'd be any good anymore. He behaved in his youth like a typical major. The son of a rich dad, did not study, burned his life, thoughtlessly spent money. His mother and father could not reach him at that time. And then suddenly, Andrew seemed to grow up and get smart. My parents were happy about it. For complete happiness, they needed only one thing: for their son to get married, start a family, and give him grandchildren. However, Andrew was still very young, so his mother and father did not insist much. And then Victoria appeared in Andrew's life. Victoria once came to their office for work. She worked as an economist for a partner organization. And so there were some questions in the accounting department. That's why Victoria was sent to sort it out. Andrew ran into her at the very entrance. He was in a hurry to get to the parking lot. He was called to the department, and here she is, Victoria. This girl was not at all Andrew's types. Pretty, but not having model data. She is short, very thin with short hair, attentive gray eyes, freckles on the nose, thin lips. In some ways, she resembled an elf from a fairy tale. Andrew, without understanding why, stopped, looking at the visitor, and she absently glanced at him and hurried on. In her hands, the girl tightly clutched a folder with documents, and Andrew, although in a great hurry, followed her. He himself, not yet aware of his actions, just on a whim. I didn't go in vain. On the third floor, the elf girl stopped and began to look around in confusion. She was clearly lost. It's not surprising. Their office is a maze. The intricacies of stairs and corridors always confuse newcomers. Have you lost something? Andrew turned to the girl with a smile. He was glad to have the opportunity to talk to her under such a plausible pretext. And the beautiful stranger smiled back. I need to go to accounting, and I'm kind of lost. I will be happy to accompany you. Andrew deliberately took her the longest way. On the way, they met and talked. Victoria communicated easily and naturally, as if she had known Andrew for many years, and this manner was very impressive to the guy. He didn't want to part with her at all when the accounting office door loomed on the horizon. Well, here we are, Andrew said, with a slight disappointment in his voice. To be honest, I don't want to let you go there. Oh, why are there such angry employees? Victoria joked, that's not the point. It's just that I have to leave right now, and when I get back, you'll be gone. And I don't want that at all, to break up now and not see each other anymore, you know. Understand? The girl nodded and then added, I do feel the same way. After these words, Andrew seemed to be overwhelmed by a warm wave. My heart felt light and light. The world around me began to play with bright colors. She likes him too. This is real happiness. Andrew suddenly wanted to grab her in his arms and circle around the corridor, but it's probably too early for such a big hug. That's good to hear. Andrew limited himself to a restrained phrase, but his shining eyes, without any doubt, conveyed to Victoria the joy that the guy experienced after her words. Andrew asked for Victoria's phone, and she handed him her cell phone. The guy quickly dialed his number from it and made a call. Now we are in touch. I will definitely call you, sir. I'll be waiting. The girl replied seriously, and he called. Of course, he called the same day. As soon as I returned from the department, I reported to the general manager. There were still a few hours left before the end of the working day. Victoria finished a little later than Andrew. They agreed that the guy would pick her up at work in the evening. He stopped by. I arrived a little earlier than the agreed time and sat in the car for a long time, carefully looking at the porch of the office building. People were coming out of the doors, one at a time and in groups, but Victoria was not among them, and then she appeared. Andrew jumped out of the car and rushed to meet her. At first, they sat in a cafe for a while, got to know each other better, told some important moments about themselves. Victoria lived alone with her mother in a small apartment in a new building. She graduated from the economics department of the local university. Andrew studied there too. Perhaps if he had attended classes more often, he would have met Victoria early. However, it is unlikely that she would have hooked him then. At that time, the guy was attracted only to ladies with model looks. And quite recently, everything was exactly the same. Andrew now did not understand himself why Victoria had so impressed him. Outwardly, it was completely not his type. But communication, it was incredibly pleasant and easy to communicate with her. He and Victoria were very different. Andrew walked confidently through life, loved noisy companies, was not afraid to tell people the truth to their face, even if it offended them. He did not like to understand the feelings of others and was distinguished by his straightforwardness. Victoria was very delicate. She was afraid of hurting others and was very sensitive to people's mood swings, calm, peaceful, serious, hardworking, and incredibly responsible. A little timid, but at the same time capable of achieving her goals for a lot. Andrew and Victoria, they seemed to complement each other like two halves of one. They were so different, drawn to each other with an irresistible force. They didn't want to part at all, so they walked until late at night, just holding hands and sat in the car hugging. Victoria loved museums and exhibitions, and she also liked leisurely walks, intimate conversations, trips outside the city to places where you can safely admire nature. Andrew showed her a slightly different world. He took Victoria out to rock concerts, invited her to his noisy, cheerful companies. Victoria was also very interested in all this. Andrew knew for sure that she wasn't lying, wasn't trying to pretend to be happy to please him. Firstly, somehow it turned out that they were very sincere with each other from the very beginning. Therefore, Victoria would not hide her feelings. Secondly, Andrew saw her eyes perfectly well. There was admiration, delight, and interest in them. Andrew felt happy next to her and thanked fate that he then bumped into Victoria at the door and did not. The guy met Victoria's mother. She turned out to be a pleasant woman, the same age as his parents. She made incredibly fragrant tea from some herbs and baked mind-blowing pies. Victoria kept complaining that she couldn't do it that way. But Andrew, he was ready to forgive her for both her inability to cook and her inability to do housework. And her shyness generally touched him. Andrew still didn't know how to offer Victoria to move in with him. After Veronica, he never invited anyone to his place. Of course, it would be more logical to make Victoria an offer. They had been dating for almost a year. The age of both was quite suitable for marriage, but Andrew still doubted. He was afraid to take such an important step. There were many reasons for this. From an early age, parents warned their son against an ill-considered marriage. You are a prominent guy, a wealthy groom, more than enviable. His mother instructed the heir, girls who dream of a marriage of convenience will hover around you. Such people first look for a rich boy, then get divorced and legally demand money and property from him. Do you know how many such stories there are? Be careful. It's not that Andrew suspects Victoria of greed. No, he had never thought of her like that. But the idea has firmly stuck in my head that marriage, a wedding, is an incredibly responsible and balanced decision, and it's not worth rushing into it. And what's their hurry, really? Both are still quite young. You need to live for your own pleasure, have fun, travel. And the wedding, the stamp in the passport and other conventions, it can wait. Besides, Andrew still didn't want to deprive himself of escape routes. Yes, everything is perfect with Victoria right now, but who knows what will happen next? No, Andrew loved Victoria and was well aware of this. He had never felt such strong feelings for anyone before. But who knows what lies ahead? The Veronica story made the guy very careful. In addition, marriage involves the birth of children. But Andrew was definitely not ready for this, to take on such responsibility. Well, no, he hasn't worked up yet. There are so many interesting things in life without these diapers vests. Andrew had an example of married friends in front of his eyes. With the advent of children, the relationship between the young spouses changed, and most often for the worse. Newly minted parents got tired, devoted all their time only to the kids, began to blame each other on household issues, and measured the amount of household chores. It was as if they stopped living for themselves. For such people, conversations revolved only around children. Who went when, who has what talents, which strollers are better to choose, and all that. These conversations made Andrew terribly sad. No, he wasn't ready for fatherhood yet. He wanted to live for himself and enjoy his youth, not devote all his time to screaming backbiting. No, sometime later in the distant future, Andrew saw himself as a father, but certainly not in the next 5 to 7 years. In general, while Andrew was thinking about how to offer Victoria to move in with him, bypassing the issue of the wedding, she herself started talking about living together. Andrew felt like a complete fool. He thought about this topic so much, made some plans, and was tormented by doubts. All I had to do was talk frankly, as always, with Victoria. It turned out that she herself had been thinking about moving in. By the way, I haven't thought about the wedding yet either. I understand that I kind of shouldn't say that, but I would so like to fall asleep and wake up in your arms, and it's easier for me to get to work from you. Andrew was beaming. That's how the question, over which he had been painfully pondering for a long time, was easily solved. Victoria seemed to be reading his mind. Or maybe it was. Now Andrew and Victoria were parting only for the duration of their work. They lived together as a family. First, of course, there was the lapping stage. Victoria turned out to be completely independent in terms of everyday life. Well, it's understandable. I lived with my mother after all. Andrew taught her a lot. How to cook and quickly clean the rooms. It was fun and very sweet. It seemed that such activities brought Victoria and Andrew even closer together. Victoria turned out to be a capable student she loved cooking complex, unusual dishes. Maybe it's time for you to change your profession. Andrew jokingly suggested trying out another gastronomic masterpiece of the girl. Such talents cannot be hidden from a wide audience. And maybe I will, Victoria replied almost seriously. But not now. When I have free time, I'll open my own restaurant. Me, that would be great. Over time, friends Victoria and Andrew got to know each other, got mixed up. They turned out to be a very good company. Young people like to go out together, say, then to the forest, then to the river, then on a tourist trip. And sometimes they would gather at someone's house and play board games. Andrew had no idea before that it was so exciting and fun. It seemed to him that board games were only for children, but no. One of Victoria's friends, Helly, always looked at Andrew in a special way. It was confusing for him a little bit. Oh, and this Helly of yours, is she okay with me? Andrew decided to talk to Victoria. Yes, everything's fine. She smiled. It's just that you look incredibly similar to the guy Helly was once very in love with. There's such an ugly story there. Helly literally followed him around, practically begged for attention, and he just laughed and defiantly dated other girls. I had the right. Of course, he didn't have to have an affair with her, even if she was head over heels in love with him. But he was too cruel and ugly with her, and Helly continued to love him and suffer. Yeah, that's right. Drama. Well, we were very young then. We had just graduated from school. Youth and stupidity. At that age, everything is forgivable. I've never even seen him. Helly was just telling me about this guy. And recently, I confessed that you look just like him. Such a coincidence is strange. And how did this story end? Nothing special. The guy went to the capital to look for happiness, taking another passion with him. Pebbles suffered, searched for him on social networks. Then she let go somehow, of course. At least she started paying attention to other guys. It seemed that this story was forgotten. And then suddenly I have you. So the memories of her first unhappy love came flooding back to her. Do I look that much like him? Very much. He's handsome too, according to her. But you only have an external resemblance. You are a kind, sensitive, deep person, and he is an egoist, shallow. And how did Helly not notice this right away? She didn't seem to be a stupid girl. Andrew sighed. Victoria did not know him in her youth, but he was no better than that beloved Helly. He also didn't spare anyone's feelings and manipulated the girls. Veronica came to mind again. Where is she now? What's wrong with her? Andrew shook his head, pushing away unpleasant thoughts. Andrew and Victoria lived soul to soul, walked, traveled, met with friends, went shopping together as a married couple, supported each other in all situations, took care of each other. With all this, Andrew felt free. Victoria was calm about the fact that sometimes Andrew met with his friends. Victoria could have spent the same evening with her friends at a bar or club, and Andrew wasn't jealous at all. He was sure that Victoria would not do anything wrong, would not betray him. This went on for several years. Andrew and Victoria sometimes thought about the future. Victoria dreamed of having children. She already wanted to become a mother. Andrew saw this, but he was still not ready for parenthood. Andrew and Victoria openly discussed this topic. Before the birth of a child, I have to do a lot more, the guy reasoned. Both in terms of career and in general. I dream of going on a tour of wild Africa, learning how to fly an airplane, and opening my own business. All this will be problematic with children in my arms. And I still have unrealized dreams and unfulfilled plans because I am not ready for children yet. It's a pity, Victoria sighed. I've been dreaming about a child for a long time, about our baby. But if you're not ready, I'll wait. I want this child to be a joy for both of us. I don't agree with the other option. And Drew was glad that Victoria understood and accepted his decision. He would do a lot for her, but not for a child, at least not yet. But fate, as it usually happens, decided in its own way. One day, Victoria broke the news to Andrew, turning his whole well-established and such a happy and carefree life upside down. Andrew, we need to have a serious talk. Has something happened? Andrew felt a little uneasy. Victoria looked too confused and pale. She may be seriously me. What happened? I don't even know how to tell you about it. Andrew suddenly decided that she was leaving him. Fear gripped his heart with an icy hand. Not that. He wasn't ready to lose Victoria. No, but what if she met someone else? He spoke directly, sincerely, as always. It's hard for me to talk about it. I know how you feel about this issue. Anyway, what? Andrew felt like he'd been hit on the head with a sandbag. The news had a strong effect on him. He felt panic rising in slow waves. Early parenthood terrified him. I do not know how it happened. We're protecting ourselves. But it happens. I have already been to the doctor. He said that no method gives a 100 guarantee. So that, Victoria, do you know that I can't become a father now? Andrew said softly, looking into her eyes. I'm starting to develop my business, and I'm going to have a long business trip soon. And anyway, there are so many plans that have not yet been implemented. This is not the time for a child. It's not the time at all. I understand. Victoria lowered her eyes. But this child, he already exists, you know. I was even allowed to listen to his heartbeat. It's such a miracle. I know how much you want this. But I can't. No, don't be afraid. Victoria took his hands and looked into his eyes. Everything will be fine, just think. We have everything to make this baby happy. An apartment, a job, money. All people give birth in much more cramped conditions and still cope. We'll be happy too. Don't be afraid. We're together. Andrew shook his head. An image of a friend who had recently become a father suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Disheveled hair, a smeared t-shirt, red eyes from lack of sleep, and a stupid, meaningless smile on his face. No, Andrew didn't want to become the same. Then the champion began to insist on an interruption. It was hard to pronounce even the word itself, looking Victoria in the eye. But what can I do? It was about freedom and security. Besides, he doesn't give up on the idea of having a child at all. No, of course not. He and Victoria will have children someday, but not now. Definitely not now. Well, how can she not understand? After all, they had discussed it so many times and came to a common decision not to rush with the child, saying, "Oh, you even understand what you're offering me." Victoria's voice was steely. It's understandable. It's hard for her too. I understand. Well, that happens. Medicine is at a high level now. Your term is still short. Everything will pass quickly and painlessly. And there are no consequences. Andrew knew perfectly well that he was saying very scary words, but he couldn't. He just couldn't do anything else right now. And in general, he also has the right to vote in this matter because the child will completely change and turn his world around. Victoria has to reckon with him. and she looked at him as if he were a complete stranger. There was pain, disappointment, and disbelief in her eyes. "Sure is scaring me," Victoria said. "You're scaring me a lot, sir, as you only knew how you scare me." Andrew suddenly remembered the old words of his mother, her warnings about cunning girls who want to get pregnant to marry wealthy men. And then the ropes of them are, "Did you just want me to marry you?" Andrew said. "You're just like everyone else." And I thought Victoria, without saying a word more, turned around and stormed out of the apartment. She managed to take only the keys to her car and a mirror. Andrew immediately realized that he had said too much. Of course, Victoria wasn't like that. He shouldn't have offended her. On the other hand, Victoria must understand that there will be no child. Andrew became a father early, and he told her about it many times. As it was, she agreed or just pretended to agree. Andrew jumped out onto the balcony. He will now call Victoria back. They will calmly discuss everything and come to the conclusion that they still have nowhere to hurt. Andrew will even apologize for his harsh words. He really loves Victoria. He loves her very much. She is the closest, dearest person to him, no matter what. But Victoria didn't even turn around at his shout. She was so offended. She got into the car, slammed the door loudly, and sped off into the distance. "Nothing," Andrew muttered to himself. "It's going to cool down now, weigh the pros and cons, and come back. You can't live without me, and I know you love me, and I love you, and we'll still be together." Andrew took a bottle of cognac from the bar and uncorked it. He needed to relax now. The strong drink made everything that was happening not so terrible. The world has become simpler and clearer for a while. Andrew wrote Victoria a conciliatory text message. He apologized for the harsh words, confessed his love, and called for negotiations. The guy was even perhaps ready to discuss the issue with the child. Since it is so important for Victoria, he would probably make such a sacrifice. After all, it was unlikely that he would ever meet a more suitable girl than her. He can't live without her, no matter how you look at it. Andrew even now sorely missed his soulmate next to him. Yes, everything didn't go according to plan, so Andrew was scared. The news just confused him. Andrew dialed her number several times. The girl did not answer that evening. It is understandable. He is offended, maybe even crying. Andrew grimaced. It was unbearable to realize myself as the tormentor of a loved one. He wanted to give Victoria joy, make her smile, make the girl happy. But that's how it turned out. He became the cause of her tears. Andrew knew how to fix the situation. He spent the whole evening thinking about his situation and resigned himself to Victoria's decision, accepted her point of view. Yes, Andrew will do everything to make his beloved happy, no matter what it cost him. Now, when Victoria left him in an unknown direction in her car, Andrew clearly realized that he needed her. It is very necessary, just vital. I wish Victoria would cool off and answer his call. Andrew couldn't sleep that night. Victoria never showed up. She didn't answer the message or the calls. I was offended. For the first time in her life, she was offended by him, so much so that she didn't want to hear anything about him. Andrew was watching some show on TV and absently flipped through the city news feed on his phone. Suddenly, a message about an accident on the highway that happened quite recently caught his eye. There were also photos from the scene. Andrew stared in horror at the wrecked Victoria car. He himself gave the car to his beloved when she passed for a license. It happened a little over a year ago. Victoria was very embarrassed at the time. It was too expensive a gift, but Andrew was adamant in his decision, and she had to give up. Victoria loved this car so much, called it a swallow, and drove the car to the car wash much more often than necessary. Andrew was still hoping for a mistake. You never know who drives such white cars around the city. Still, this is not an exclusive car, but the suspension in the form of a cat and a ballerina on the broken windshield said otherwise. Andrew bought it in Finland, where he was recently sent on a business trip. The probability that someone else in their city has a pendant from another country is not so great. This is a Victoria car. Andrew frantically began to search for information about the accident. There was little information so far. It seems like the driver lost control and crashed into a road fence at high speed. It is unlikely that she would have started to develop more speed on the highway. It's not like her at all. Only Victoria, running away from him the day before, was in it. And why hadn't he thought of detaining her? Grab her hand, hold her close, Ask for forgiveness. Don't let her go anywhere. The driver was admitted to the regional hospital in serious condition. Andrew read under the scary photo, in serious condition, but alive. Andrew has already called a taxi to go to the regional hospital. It was the middle of the night. A sleepy girl at the reception desk inquired who Andrew is the victim with. Upon learning that he was her roommate, the nurse, with a hint of regret in her voice, said that in this case she had no right to disclose information about the patient. If only you were married, Andrew smiled bitterly. He was not going to leave the walls of the hospital. He kept walking around, trying to look through the windows until he was chased away by a guard. But the guy didn't give up. He went back to the lobby of the clinic, determined to find out at least something about Victoria's condition. That's where the guy ran into her mother. They rushed to each other, hugged. The woman looked confused, scared, and tearful, and that, in general, is not surprising. She did not know anything about her daughter's quarrel with Andrew. She did not even know about it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have talked to him. It's all because of him. It's his fault for what happened. How is Victoria? They don't tell me anything. I was told that he is in intensive care now, after surgery. Her condition is very serious. The doctor says there is little hope. Did you know that Victoria was expecting a baby? Andrew nodded. Well, the child, of course, was not saved. Doctors are fighting for her life. Wow, how happy you would have been if it hadn't been for this accident. You would have been waiting for the baby. I would have been happy for you. Andrew nodded to the beat of Victoria's mother's words, not noticing how tears were running down his cheeks. Victoria's mother signed some papers, and Andrew was allowed to go to the girl in intensive care. However, not for long. He was sitting next to Victoria, who seemed to be sleeping, holding her hand and talking, asking for forgiveness, begging her to wake up. He promised that as soon as she came to her senses, they would immediately get married and start planning children, painted pictures of a wonderful future together in the hope that these prospects would make Victoria come to her senses because she has something to come back for. Happiness was so close. Why didn't Andrew understand this right away? How could he talk so harshly to a loved one? It was unbearable to realize that Victoria was in such a state because of him. After all, that's why she was driving at high speed on the highway, just because of their Victoria usually drove very carefully. But here, no one knew about Andrew's whine, but it didn't make it any easier for him. He only dreamed that Victoria would wake up after a terrible accident. She'll never be the same again, but it doesn't matter. Andrew will be there. He would be her arms and legs if he had to. If only I could see my beloved eyes again and hear my native voice. But the miracle did not happen. Victoria never came to her senses. One night she was gone. The doctors couldn't do anything. Andrew didn't want anything at all. He forgot to eat, stopped going to work, and did not answer calls from friends. Life has become black, has lost all meaning, and it's also a feeling of guilt. It sometimes covered the guy so that it became impossible to breathe. Andrew even thought about ending his suffering overnight. Why should he live? Nothing good will happen anyway because nothing will bring Victoria back to him, and he didn't deserve to be happy. After all, it's because of his stupid fear that his beloved is not there now. Not at all. She loved life so much. She dreamed so much about this baby. His parents hired an eminent doctor for Andrew, but he could do little to help the guy. He was saying some general phrases trying to be clever. But this man, he didn't know the whole truth. Andrew couldn't tell anyone about his guilt at all. It's too hard, too scary. And one day, Andrew met Helly, Victoria's friend, quite by accident, when he was crawling to his den from the store. Now Andrew could only get to the nearest wine shop and immediately go home. Drinking was at least a little confusing and distracting. Helly looked at Andrew with sympathy and regret. She was also worried about the loss of her best friend. He and Victoria were very close, but after learning about Andrew's condition, Helly came to him to support him. An amazing man. The guy did not mind her company and invited the girl to his place. They were sitting at the table, remembering Victoria, crying, and Andrew suddenly decided on a revelation. He told Helly the truth. He told me all about his nightmarish behavior before the fatal accident. It's all my fault, the guy concluded. He thought Helly would start insulting and scolding him. It would have been quite natural and fair, but she felt sorry for him. It's just unbelievable. It's not your fault. That's how the circumstances turned out. Helly stroked Andrew's head like a little one. It made him feel better. And were just scared. And Victoria, she was also scared and confused. You didn't want that, did you? And she didn't want to. It rained that day, and the road was slippery. It's not your fault. It's a combination of circumstances. Helly helped Andrew better than an expensive psychologist. They were on the phone now, and sometimes they talked. And these conversations had a soul-saving effect for Andrew. The guy came to his senses, returned to work. After Stefan, he began to climb out of the deep black pit in which he had spent a long time. Parents were happy. Colleagues and friends noted that Andrew was becoming the same. They were all wrong. Andrew knew for sure that he would never be the same again. It has been many years since that terrible day. Andrew was still counting down the age of his and Victoria's baby. If he had been born on time, he would have already turned 14. A man seeing boys the same age as his son on the street involuntarily wondered what his child would become. Like now, those memories are piling up again. There's no getting away from them. Of course, the acute pain, as in the first time after the tragedy, is no longer there. But the longing and sadness for what did not happen is now forever with Andrew. He accepted it. Andrew, as expected, did not meet a woman even remotely resembling Victoria. And there probably were no such people in the world, and he would not agree to anything less. Especially after I managed to find out true love, the kind that happens to people only once in a lifetime. And for some, it probably never happens at all. Andrew was about to get out of the car to go to the supermarket when suddenly a 3-year-old kid caught his attention. A tiny boy in a shirt, obviously from someone else's shoulder, was smartly working next to the trash cans. The child climbed onto the boxes standing on top of each other. Otherwise, he could not reach the edge of the container. With his small hands, he was busily sorting through the leftovers in the trash can. There was a restaurant in the mall, so there were often groceries in the trash. All the homeless people here knew about this, and therefore, next to the tanks, you could often see people hunting for. Most often they were adults or teenagers. And here it's just a crumb. Such people should not yet appear on the street unaccompanied by their parents. Was his mother or father somewhere nearby? Andrew looked around. No, there were no adults. The kid was walking by himself, and judging by his confident and businesslike movements. This was not the first time this had happened to him. It's strange and very suspicious. Andrew could no longer leave this child without attention. You never know what can happen to such a crumb. Yes, even if he falls into the trash can, he won't get out later. And then there are big stray dogs, bad people, fast cars. There are many dangers facing the baby on the street. Should I call the police and let them figure it out for themselves? But will this call somehow harm the child? You need to be more careful in such matters. Meanwhile, the kid finished his business in the trash can. Grabbing a bag of leftovers, he awkwardly climbed down from the crates and headed somewhere, chewing on a crust of bread. Andrew's heart ached with pity. He's so small, he walks clumsily like a child, and already he has to get his own food. It's not from a good life that the child got into the trash cans. Andrew couldn't ignore this situation. He slipped out of the car and went after the child. The boy walked confidently towards the road. Adults hurried past, not noticing the little man. Only occasionally someone cast a surprised glance at the boy and walked on. Such indifference was amazing. A small child is completely alone on the street, and no one cares. However, perhaps they think that the baby is following one of the adults. The boy turned into a narrow alley. Andrew followed him. Another couple of 100 meters, and the child ended up in the private sector. Andrew has never been to this place before. Wow, it's almost downtown. Just 100 meters from here is the central street with a well-groomed park, luxurious fountains, and a wide pavement. And here there is poverty, desolation, dust, garbage. The boy walked up to the old gate. Beyond the fence was a garden overgrown with weeds, in the depths of which was a long unpainted house with a sagging roof. The kid pushed open the old door and slipped through the gap. Andrew was outside watching what would happen next. Are adults waiting for a child here, and why do they let such a crumb go alone? The boy ran up the porch and disappeared through the ajar front door. Andrew stood for a moment undecided. The child is at home. Nothing happened to him. We could go back. I saw the kid off, made sure he didn't get into trouble, all. But Andrew's heart still remained restless. He felt sorry for the boy. The unknown was scary. What if the child is ill now? What if he is in danger? And Andrew knocked on the gate. He did not find a call, so he had to use force. A minute later, an old man appeared on the porch. He was thin, short, with a swollen face overgrown with stubble and an unhealthy red hue. Swollen, cloudy eyes, everything is clear. This person is either drunk or in a state of withdrawal from a binge. "Oh, are you coming to me?" Grandfather asked in a hoarse voice. "Angered to you," Andrew confirmed. "What kind of question is this?" "Oh, about the kid who just came home. I have a conversation with you." The gate at the entrance was unlocked. The yard was almost a dump, mountains of garbage and broken bricks. Beer cans and bottles of cheap booze are everywhere. And suddenly, in the midst of all this chaos, a homemade sandbox. "Oh, what did you want?" the old man asked, not too politely. "Oh, I just thought maybe you need help. A child is alone on the street at that age. I found him at the trash cans at the mall. He was looking for food." How many times have I said, "Don't go far there alone"? But he doesn't listen. The child was looking for food. He was obviously very hungry. "Who is he to you?" "A grandson," the old man replied. "My granddaughter is the only one." "And you're right, good man. He and I really could use some help. I can't work because of my age." "And where are his parents?" he also asked. Grandfather relaxed. "I'd like to know that myself." "Who is the father?" "I don't know. My daughter Anne was confused in her testimony, but she is walking somewhere. I haven't heard from her for 3 months." I didn't sound the alarm. Andrew was surprised at GHE. "What if something happened to your daughter?" "Or isn't going to happen to her." The old man waved his hand. "Yes, and not for the first time. Far from the first time. She's walking. Anne started drinking at the age of 15, and then she took off. Here I gave birth. It seems like Stefan was a little bit, and then she broke off again. It's a boring life to babysit a baby. So my granddaughter turned out to be with me. It's safer with me. And Anne, there is no hope for her. I would have killed my son a long time ago." Andrew raised his eyebrows in surprise. If the child is better off with this obviously drinking person, what kind of mother is there? So there's nothing to worry about for Anne to eat, and the garrulous old man continued. "If anything had happened, one of her friends would have already told me. So you say to sound the alarm, to search?" "Yes. The guardianship authorities will immediately withdraw from me and hand over to an orphanage if they find out about his mother. And he's already attached to me, and I'm attached to him. The boy can't be there without me." Andrew had completely different thoughts on this matter. It seemed to him that a child would still be much better off in an orphanage than in a crumbling house with a drinking grandfather. And the guys are well fed there. Stefan certainly won't have to think about food himself. "No." "Grandpa, who is this?" Stefan jumped out onto the porch. Small, dirty, funny. The olive black eyes carefully examined the uninvited guest. Andrew smiled at the kid. He was so touching, so defenseless. The man realized that he could no longer just leave, and he didn't understand what was happening to him. Only Andrew suddenly wanted to hide the baby from all the troubles and misfortunes that fell on his shaggy head. "This is a good uncle," the old man explained. "He wants to help us." "Oh, are you hungry?" Andrew asked, trying to make his voice sound as soft as possible. And Stefan shook his head negatively. "Or, we have plenty of food at home. I brought it. Would you like to eat with us?" Andrew immediately went to the nearest store and bought 2 bags of groceries for Stefan and his grandfather. There was meat, fruits, and sweets for the baby. And toys, cheap plastic toys from the yard shop. Stefan was particularly delighted with them. Andrew thought a lot about this chance encounter afterwards. Stefan is in danger with such relatives, but his grandfather is right. The baby will be even worse in the orphanage. Stefan is so sensitive, vulnerable, touching. He needs love and attention. His grandfather loves him in his own way. The boy feels it. It will be very difficult for him in the orphanage. Andrew now often visited Stefan, brought food, toys, books, talked with pleasure, played with the boy, talked with his grandfather about he couldn't leave him. Somehow, imperceptibly, this child became Andrew far from a stranger. The boy's grandfather was still drinking, sometimes alone, sometimes in the company of drinking companions. They were seemingly peaceful, harmless people, and they treated the child with warmth and concern. No one offended the boy. There's nothing good about it anyway, for a child to be in such a place. The mother still did not appear. It seems that she has completely forgotten about the existence of her son and father. Sir has him go for a walk. After the old man waved his hand when Andrew asked him about his daughter. If she doesn't show up, then everything is fine with her. As soon as she presses, she will immediately come back. This has happened more than once already. Andrew tried to get his grandfather into the hospital. Of course, he is already a respectable age. Well, what if the treatment helps and the old man stops drinking, takes up the upbringing of his grandson? There are miracles. Not in this case. My grandfather flatly refused treatment and assured me that he was doing well. The old man couldn't accept that he was doing something wrong. In his worldview, such a life was a variant of the norm. Sex. That's how everyone lives. Andrew continued to visit Stefan and helped the family with groceries. He himself did not understand why he suddenly became so attached to Stefan. Perhaps he saw his unborn son in him. The boy was reaching for Andrew. He loved him with all his soul, even made some crafts for him. It was very nice. Andrew found himself thinking that he had been waiting for Friday all week. It was on this day that he visited Stefan and his grandfather, and no business could distract him from the visit. The old man had Andrew's phone number. He left it to him just in case. You never know, you might need help urgently. But his grandfather never bothered him. And then suddenly, I called in the middle of the week. Andrew immediately realized that it was bad. Binshui have a problem, and my grandfather said. To come on, Stefan is being taken away. Andrew immediately rushed to a familiar house. He was very worried about Stefan. What if something happened to the boy? The old man didn't really explain where the baby was being taken. Or maybe to the hospital, but Stefan turned out to be healthy. He was sitting on his grandfather's lap and looked at the two women in police uniforms with fright. Seeing Andrew, Stefan was torn again. It was probably from relief this time, and there was so much hope for the kind uncle in his dark eyes. What's the matter? Andrew asked the police officers, and we are trying to remove the child in order to transfer him to a children's institution. One of the women explained, and this man who claims to be the boy's grandfather, he just won't give it away. It makes the child nervous. The second employee joined in. The boy is afraid of us now. He clings to his grandfather and does not come to us in any way. Session and is dead. The old man explained from his corner. There were tears in his eyes at the same time, and he forced them back with an effort of will. It turns out that a week ago she got burned in the garage with her friends. They were drinking there and listening to music in the car, so that's it. Stefan is now a complete orphan. They are unlikely to leave it to his grandfather. The age is not suitable and the lifestyle is still the same. But after all, you really can't go to an orphanage. It will break down there. This is a freedom-loving, curious kid who needs love and attention so much. It's not going to be easy for him at the orphanage. Is it possible to leave everything as it is? At least Andrew clarified. The fact is that the mother did not take part in the child's life. The boy did not even know her. He was brought up by his grandfather. In this regard, nothing will change for Stefan. As he lived, so he will live with him. I'm looking after him. I promise to come here every day. Sorry. I've an order. At the senior police officer shook her head. We have to pick him up. His grandfather can try to get custody. But to be honest, I don't think he will succeed. And if I take custody, these words flew out of Andrew's mouth before he had time to think about the idea well. It was only after uttering the phrase that the man realized that he was really ready for such a thing. He will be happy to become a father, loving, attentive, caring. I don't mind, the grandfather assured, hugging his grandson. Stefan and Andrew will be fine. They love each other. I'll sign everything you need. Just don't take him to an orphanage. You. The woman from the police was surprised. You can, of course. We will issue temporary custody for you. It won't be long. If you want to take it for good, you will have to go through the school of foster parents, collect a lot of certificates, and also need the consent of your spouse. I'm not married. Well, then adoption is out of the question. A child needs a full family. Okay, let's get temporary custody for now, and then we'll figure it out. It is possible, but the child should live in another place, not here. These are unsuitable conditions for a boy. I agree. Andrew, having connected all his connections, quickly issued temporary custody to Stefan. He moved the boy to his place. Stefan even opened his mouth in surprise when he saw a clean, spacious apartment. The kid has never been in such houses. Of course, he really liked it here. But Andrew needed a babysitter for Stefan. After all, the man worked a lot. He could not devote all his time to the child. And then Andrew remembered about Helly. Helly, Victoria's friend, kind, sensitive, understanding. It was Helly who once helped Andrew come to his senses, return to life. They still talked, sometimes corresponded on social networks, congratulated each other on holidays. Andrew knew that Helly had recently divorced her husband, left him with a little daughter the same age as the boy. The woman lost her job due to constant sick leave and now earned some pennies. Andrew asked her to come to his department, but Helly refused. She needed to take care of her daughter. The girl grew up very sickly and did not go to the garden. What kind of work is there? But now Andrew was ready to offer Helly a wonderful option. She would become a babysitter for Stefan. Andrew will arrange a good salary for her, and Helly will be able to do her professional duties without looking up from her daughter. Everyone is fine. And Helly is with money and at work, and her daughter is with her, and children of the same age will certainly be more interesting and more fun together. Helly gladly agreed to this offer. Now she came to Andrew's house with her daughter every morning, and he went to work with a calm soul, knowing that Stefan was in good hands. It was an incredibly cozy and peaceful time. Andrew liked coming home now. There he was greeted by a smiling Helly and cheerful kids. The mind-blowing aromas of homemade food wafted from the kitchen. There were children's drawings on the desk, cleanliness, comfort, warmth. They usually had dinner, all four of them. We talked, laughed, and shared the news of the day. Andrew, of course, did not forget about the old man grandfather. Every weekend, she and Stefan made sure to visit him. Grandfather was happy for his grandson and was sincerely grateful to Andrew. "You're lucky, granddaughter," he said. "I don't know for what merits fate sent us such a man." But a few months passed, and Andrew received a call from custody to remind him that Stefan would soon have to be returned to the orphanage. The term of temporary custody was coming to an end. Just thinking about it made Andrew's heart freeze. A trusting, funny kid will end up in government walls unless Andrew comes up with something to adopt him. Andrew has conditions. Prosperity is more than decent, but the child can only be given to a full family, which means that Andrew needs to get married, conclude a fake marriage so that everything is as it should be according to the papers. All that remained was to find a bride. But who should I turn to with such a strange request? It has to be someone Andrew can trust. The answer came by itself. The ideal candidate was at Andrew's house every day. "Hey, Shelley, we need to have a serious talk with you." He outlined the situation to her, explained why he needed this stamp in his passport. "Well, actually, I made an offer." Helly listened to Andrew attentively, forgetting to breathe from time to time. The man looking at her was sure that she would. Now he will finish, and Helly, I will tell him a lot of reasons why he cannot do this and will be right. After all, this is a very unusual case. "Andrew, please tell me, don't you remember me at all?" "That's a strange question." Andrew was revived on Helly in amazement. "Well, don't I remember?" "Of course I remember. Victoria introduced us." "What? No, we've known each other before." Helly sighed. "More precisely, I knew you. You hardly noticed me. I followed you around at the university, looked into your eyes, tried to get to know you. I was dying of love. You've been changing beauties like gloves. As it seemed to me then, he was laughing at my feelings. Then I realized that you didn't notice me at all. Victoria told me that you had such an unhappy love before. Only then this guy kind of left, if I'm not mistaken." "Well, that's what I told my friends when I realized that I wanted to turn this page in my life. They didn't know who this man was. I've told them about you sometimes, but I've never shown them." "Wow." That's all Andrew could say. It's so strange and unexpected. For now, many years later, you suddenly proposed to me." Helly smiled. "It's clear that it's not real, but still. That's the irony of fate. Did you really love me that much?" How could I not notice anything? I loved you. I've never felt this way about anyone since. It's for the best." They were too strong, destructive even. But then I was able to forget you, stop loving you. I've grown up. I realize that you are an egoist and a major, but now I have a kind, brave man in front of me, attentive, adult, and reliable. This man could not get past the misfortune of a small child. This person solves problems, not runs away from them. So what? Have you fallen in love with me again? Andrew joked B. He still couldn't get over Helly's unexpected confession. It's quite possible, the woman smiled. Why not? Well, will you marry me? What do you think? The deserted shore, covered with soft white sand, is turquoise. The calm waves of the ocean, the red sun is rapidly going over the horizon, seagulls hovering in the distance. A family is located on the shore. A tanned man in blue bathing shorts is playing soccer with 2 children. A boy with intelligent black eyes and a charming girl, shouting laughter and cheerful hubbub. The mother of the family looks at the development of events with a smile from a comfortable chaise longue. She has a glass with a tropical cocktail in her hands and a wide-brimmed hat on her head. The woman looks rested and peaceful. The head of the family finally had a vacation, so the 4 of them waved on the ocean coast. The woman got up and slowly approached the beach soccer players, from under whose feet clouds of sand were rushing. Andrew, it's time for the kids to have dinner. Well, you need to go to bed early. The tour is tomorrow morning. Remember, worse. The man smiled. Then he came closer, put his arm around her waist and kissed. Did you hear that, children? You have to obey your mother, but we want to play some more. The little ones objected. Well, we'll play some more and arrange a shipwreck in the bathroom, and then we'll compete to see who falls asleep faster. Oh, hurrah! The children clapped their hands. You are just a wonderful father. Helly smiled. SGN, and the husband is generally the best in the world. How lucky I am to have you. Andrew hugged his wife again, then picked up the children. He put his daughter on one arm, his son on the other, and the family headed for the hotel.